It's Thursday afternoon, 4 p.m. Central European Summer Time. I am Elena Vocale, Event Coordinator at SpaceWatch.Global, and it is my pleasure to welcome you here again to another episode of our Space Café Benelux with host Dr. Heike Poignand. As always, we truly value your participation and ongoing feedback. We're committed to learning and from your input and continuously improving our webinars to make them more engaging and informative for you. SpaceWatch.Global is a Europe-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. I would like to thank all our private and corporate supporters in 2023 that showed their continuous commitment to keep our independent journalism alive. We really appreciate that. I know many of you are familiar with our website, our biweekly and daily newsletters. By the way, today we hit the 200th biweekly newsletter, and we're very happy about it. And the Space Café, but we also publish our Space Café podcast, so don't miss the latest episode which features Aaron Kemmer, CEO and co-founder of multiple ventures, such as Magic, Made in Space, and Max Space, speaking about the transformative potential of in-space manufacturing. We also have new episodes of our Space Café radios, so tune in for the latest episode about the Clock Conference in Oslo with Dr. Einar Björk, director of UNOSAT, and the second episode of the Space Factor mini-series with Italian space leader Giovanni Pandolfi, CSO and co-founder of Leap Space. You find our audio series wherever you get your podcasts. Our fan shop is also open for you. It's always open because it's on our website, and it's a nice way for you to support us actively and become a space watcher. If you've missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our webpage in the event section. And you can also find us on YouTube, of course. With that, I am very pleased to send over the microphone to your host, Heike. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Elena, and welcome again also from us to everyone at our next edition of the Space Café Benelux, this time from Luxembourg City. And of course, I would like to welcome our guest, Rudy Stranen from the Luxembourg Ministry of State, and we discuss Europe's quantum communication infrastructure and if it's science fiction in the making. And don't worry, we're not going to do it in Luxembourgish. Yes. So Rudy, thanks for having me also here, because it's really, really much nicer to do it in person around a little coffee, a real coffee.
Yeah.
And so before I'd like to introduce you first, also to our guests, our audience. First of all, you're not a physicist. And you graduated from the University Robert Schuman in Strasbourg with a master's degree of economics and management. And before joining the Ministry of State, you worked for 10 years for the Luxembourg Supervisory Authority for the financial sector, 10 other years in the investment fund industry, and for 5 years in the field of audit, accounting, and tax. No space, no quantum so far. Okay.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
So, and now you're our advisor at the Luxembourg Ministry of State, at the Department of Media, Connectivity and Digital Policy, the SMC, where we currently are. And you're in charge of the space activities, including the licensing of satellite operators for the spectrum part, and also the quantum communications infrastructure, our topic of today. So maybe before we start with the first question, maybe you can tell us a bit what you're actually doing, what this department of the Ministry of State is doing.
Yeah, thanks, Heike, first of all, for inviting me to this Space Café with some nice coffee here on the table. So yes, indeed, the SMC, for many people, it is not really clear what we are doing. So the SMC, the Department of Media, Connectivity, Digital Policy, is part of the Ministry of State, as you mentioned. It supports the development of a diverse media landscape, state-of-the-art data connectivity, and we also have forward-thinking policies in Luxembourg that put people in the first place. So this is globally what we are doing, but if we go a little bit deeper to explain what we are really doing, so on the field, we are working on different variety of topics. This can include written press, for example, radio, internet, audiovisual media. When we talk about connectivity, it refers to the policy making in the domain of electronic communication networks and services, radio communications, spectrum management, 5G networks, etc. So just to mention a few. But then coming also to the part that I am working on. So we are also in charge of the management of Luxembourg satellite systems, and almost forgot one, which is data protection policy. So this is globally what the SMC is doing. There are lots more other things, but just to give a small picture about what it is about, what we are doing here.
Nice, thank you. So, and then before we dive really into the quantum realm, so I would like to link your background a bit to that topic. You already mentioned a bit what the ministry is doing, but you've been really from your previous background, done a very impressive transition, I'd say. So tell us a bit, how did you get to work on space projects and the quantum communication initiative?
Yes.
What? Yeah, I mean, maybe later, but well, what's the most skill set you bring from your previous experience?
Yes, in fact, as you mentioned, I've worked almost all my life in the financial domain, let's say. So at a certain point in time, I thought it was time for a change, a big change. So I had the opportunity to come to the SMC and to dive into a world that I was really interested in, the space. So when you talk about science fiction, about Star Trek and all these things, so this was really something that was of big interest for me. And so when I came to the SMC, I didn't have any background in space that I could bring here, but I had a background in looking into documents, in looking due diligence, screening, etc. So of companies, of people. So this was also the trigger for getting me on board to work in the space domain. So to onboard also new satellite operators here in Luxembourg. And this is how I came to the SMC. Then afterwards, we jumped into this quantum communication initiative. So this is something which came to the SMC in June 2019. We received an invitation, or we had the opportunity to sign a declaration of cooperation between EU member states. This declaration was about working together for exploring how to make available across the European Union an integrated quantum secure communication infrastructure. So when we received this invitation, we made an evaluation and we had some discussions. And then Luxembourg decided to sign this declaration in June 2019 as one of the 7 first member states to sign. So there were other member states. We can name them. It's our neighbors, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Spain, Italy, and Malta. So these were the initial bulk of member states that have signed this declaration. In the meantime, all 27 member states are on board, which is also showing the interest of the other member states to explore how this initiative could be realized.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's really impressive, and I think that's also on one hand, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a physics degree to work on such a project, but on the other hand, it also gives an idea of the maturity of the sector, that we're not that we coming out of the nerd section of the basic development, but getting towards cooperation and towards an application. Okay, so if you can give us a little bit an introduction from your point. I don't want a technical deep dive, but what is quantum communication? What is QKD, and why do we need it?
Yes. So as you mentioned, I'm neither a physicist, neither a mathematician, neither an engineer. So I have a very different background, but I had to dive into the topic and to make myself a little bit familiar with what it is. So I will try to explain in a few
Maybe
simple
also
words.
from our audience, not everybody is a physicist.
No, that's
the advantage.
That's the advantage. So if I explain it in an easy way, it might be also understandable. So when we talk about quantum communication, what we want to achieve in the end is to add a security layer on the transmission of data by using a process called quantum key distribution, or we just abbreviate it to QKD, so quantum key distribution. What we're doing, or just to be a little bit clearer, when we say adding a layer, it does not mean that we replace any existing encryption that are used right now with a new one. But we just, this system or this infrastructure will provide an additional layer on top. So this is not replacing anything existing. We know that today, for example, all the sensitive data is encrypted and is sent typically across fiber optic cables or other channels together with the digital keys needed to decode the information. So this is classic encryption, but smart hackers, of course, they can read, copy information in transit, and they can do it without leaving any trace. So when we talk about quantum communication, it's a little bit different because we make use of the laws of quantum physics to protect data by using qubits or quantum bits. Without entering into the details about quantum bits or qubits, just mentioning that classical bits, as we know them today, as we use them in our laptops and computers, we talk about 1 and 0. Quantum bits can represent multiple combinations of 1 and 0 at the same time. So this is what provides also the extreme calculation power compared to a classic computer, which can only work in 1 and 0. Talking about QKD now. QKD, to explain a little bit what it is. QKD involves sending encrypted data as classical bits over networks. So this is just the same as before. The difference is that the key to decrypt the information is encoded and transmitted in a quantum state using those qubits. So we have a quantum channel for the key and a classical channel for the information flow. The key will then be used to encrypt the data on the one side and to decrypt the data on the other side of the channel. So now what is really interesting with this technology is that if an eavesdropper or a hacker tries to intercept the key, which is in a quantum state, this can be measured. So, and the two parties, they will see, or they will be aware that somebody wants to take some of the information, and they can simply drop the key and then generate a new one, and they can go on until they have a key which is really protected and which is safe.
So I know if someone's eavesdropping.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is the interesting thing about this technology, or this quantum physics, because the quantum state is in such a manner that it's very sensible, so that you can measure even the very tiniest changes. You asked me why we need it.
Yes, exactly. Why?
Yes. So the European Commission launched the European Quantum Communication Infrastructure, the EuroQCI initiative, together with the member states and ESA, in order to address the threats coming from a quantum computer, or from quantum computers in general, that are currently being developed and explored all around the world. But for the time being, there are no commercially available quantum computers in the market, so the threat is not yet there, but it's real. But once they are here, most of our present types of encryption will be at risk. So this is the idea behind. We have to protect ourselves against the upcoming threat.
Okay, thank you. That was this was a lot. Also, still a bit more technical. But yeah, it's always good to know how it works. So you mentioned the threat of quantum computing. We definitely have to distinguish between the quantum communication and then the QKD. So you described it with the difference where the quantum communication, understand it's going to be a network where at some point you have the quantum computers, quantum sensors, and also the QKD as the initial key exchange to start a communication, if I understand this correctly. And then the QKD is part of this communication structure. It's the first step to exchange the keys. So for the quantum computing, on one hand, they be part of the quantum communication infrastructure in the long term. But this time for our classical encryption, it's a threat. So just a very quick question here, yes or no, to satisfy our not only QKD fans, because there's always a big discussion about QKD. This is not the only solution to keep our encryption safe. There are also other algorithms in the making and so on, the so-called post-quantum cryptography, PQC. Is this also been taken into account, or is the whole project solely focusing on this QKD?
Short answer, no. We are considering both sides.
Okay. So it's taken into account.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, then you already mentioned the security or the threat. So maybe you can talk more about the security aspects, especially for governments and institutions. Why do they need to take the lead, or do they have to take the lead? I think.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, security or safety aspects, I think they are not only important, or it's not only an issue for governments and institutions. It concerns potentially all entities that are dealing with information and data. Just to name a few, it can be data centers, critical infrastructure in any country, healthcare sector, financial sector, energy grids, just to name a few. So there are many use cases that can be addressed. Governments and institutions on their side, also taking, for example, the European institutions. They are handling a huge amount of data every day, and of course, it's important to protect this data. So today's encryptions, as we know them, we just talked about it before, they are good, they are resistant to some kind of attacks. But still, a good hacker or smart hacker could still steal data today and decrypt it later when the quantum computer will be available. So this is still a very real threat. And we know that a lot of this data is still sensitive after many, many years. So it's not just about the short term. So we think that addressing the threat today will provide the necessary protection in the future, because once we have the quantum computer on the market, it will be too late. So we have to think about it today already. Well, quantum communication, this is what we are currently working on. It's still very early stage. So we still have a long way to go. It means that we need to also have the equipment that's needed for such a quantum communication infrastructure. These devices or this equipment, they are under development, and they're still quite expensive. So this also comes back a little bit to the question, why do we have to take the lead? The European Commission and also many of the member states, they have also tried to make this assessment and to find out how we can move forward with this initiative. And the conclusion was that the first users should be governments or institutions to use such an infrastructure, because once it will be adopted by governments, institutions, the public sector, if we take it in general, this could also be a trigger for the private sector to engage in this direction as well. So this is why well, it's a cost factor, and also somebody has to make the first step.
Okay. Yeah. So in summary, national security is one of the first thing you're looking after. So you have also the money for such a high risk endeavor, maybe a bit more than than others, but commercial applications, critical infrastructure will follow, or already working on this as well. They're included in those projects, or?
Yes, well, I think the government cannot do it on its own. We have to work with partners. So I think this is done in every member state. This can be done in research institutes, universities, private sector companies. So, yeah.
Okay. So about the EuroQCI, you already mentioned a bit. When it was put out 2019, was there a specific trigger why it was created? Or was the right time or overdue?
No, I don't think it was overdue. But I was not there in the very, very beginning. As far as I know, the first discussion started already the year before, so in 2018. And I think there were some member states that had quite a long experience in this field, and they started to push a little bit this initiative, I think, and then it came to the declaration in June 2019. This is where the EuroQCI started. For most of the member states, it was with the declaration that was signed in June that it really took off. So now, as I said before, 27 member states are on board. The European Commission is working with all the member states and with the European Space Agency to drive this and to drive this initiative forward, to develop and deploy EuroQCI over the whole territory of the European Union. So it's not only the continent as we know it, but it includes also all the territories around the world. Just take islands like Malta or the Canary Islands, or embassies around the world. So there are a lot of territories that can be included in this infrastructure. So just trying to situate also the EuroQCI where it stands today. Maybe some of you know that this year, so in March 2023, the Council of the European Union adopted a regulation on the European Secure Connectivity Program, which is called IRIS². And EuroQCI is part of this program. So it's embedded in this program and will constitute the security part of this program.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you. You already mentioned that all the member states signed the EuroQCI. So, and I think that's very, very interesting, because it's not just another European program where everybody who is automatically in, but it's an active decision of signing and being part of it to join this program. And everybody did. So that is a strong sign, I think, that it's very, very important about the security in Europe. And so I think that's very interesting. So we've been talking about this EuroQCI on a general basis, more or less. So remembering that in a space cafe.
Yeah.
So we'll have to talk about a bit where the space part comes in, right? So, and I think we also in the whole quantum communication, EuroQCI, we would have to distinguish between the terrestrial and the space applications.
Yeah.
Can you maybe tell us a bit more what's included and how this is?
Yes. So you mentioned the EuroQCI will be composed of two segments. One is the terrestrial segment. The other one is the space segment. So the terrestrial segment will rely on classic optical fibers. So classic communications, to say, at national and cross-border level. The space segments obviously will be based on satellites.
Oh, what a surprise!
Yeah. So yes, on the ground we will use the classical optical fiber optics. So we have a physical element, the key which is transmitted. The quantum key which is transmitted through the fiber optics in a quantum state is influenced by the cable itself. So it's a physical element. And to put it in a very simplified way, it's an optical link, so it's a light, and the signal will become weaker the longer the distance. So it will be absorbed little by little by the physical element that is surrounding the signal.
In the fiber.
In the fiber.
Yes, you have the attenuation in the fiber exactly. on the long distance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So generally, we talk about 80 to 100 kilometers of distance, which can be bridged in this way to transmit a key from A to B. For Luxembourg, this is not a big problem. I think
that's an advantage.
That's a very big advantage to be a small country. So we can with one central point we could cover all the country. Yes, this is quite funny. But for other member states, it's very different. So we have much bigger member states where the distances are very, very big. So if you want to communicate with entities located either inside one big country or even outside of the continent or outside of the country with another member state, we have a problem. So we need a different approach. And this is where the satellite comes into the game. As on the ground, sorry, as on the ground, we're talking about an optical link. So on the ground, the optical fiber or the fiber optics will absorb part of the information. But this is not the case when we talk about free space optics. For example, in space, you can send a link from space to the ground or the other way around. I know that Harald in the last Space Café explained a little bit what these optics is about. So this is the way we will use the system by using a satellite, which is in a low Earth orbit. And the satellite can then perfectly be used to share a key between two distant points on the Earth. The satellite will be generated on the satellite and shared with two distant points. So this is really the way forward.
Okay.
Yeah, this is where the space comes in.
Yeah, I mean that's also the very difference to classical telecommunication. Yeah. Where you have on ground, you would need every 80 kilometers, you would need a repeater or a trusted node, and which is very difficult. So technically, today you say the satellite is currently in the QKD. Most of not the communication, quantum communication, but the QKD part. And in terms of governance, so you said the EuroQCI is from European Commission, and the space part of this is done through ESA. Then is that right? It's just to understand who is taking care of what. So the whole QCI, the entire network, is European, And the space part then is handled by ESA projects, or
yes, yeah.
Just
well, the set of the space part, indeed, this is managed by ESA. As ESA is the agency in charge of
on behalf of the European Commission. Or?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is how it is handled, and then well, I think we can dig a little bit deeper into this afterwards.
No, just to make that clear, it's not always clear which European entity is responsible, how do they interact, and where to go. So that's just also to make that a bit clearer. So transitioning from the European governance a little bit to the national one. So here in Luxembourg, for the space part, it's the LSA, the Luxembourg Space Agency. So how are they involved? What's their role? How do you interact?
Well, our space agency, Luxembourg Space Agency, is involved in a project as we have an ESA part in this whole initiative. And the Luxembourg Space Agency is the interface with the European Space Agency. So it's not our department itself. So they are involved in that context. And so we are also constantly in exchange regarding this specific space part. Yeah.
Okay. So staying in Luxembourg, because we say it's a small country, and you already mentioned it in the beginning a bit. But is there a specific role for Luxembourg in the process of EuroQCI? Is it just, you mentioned Iris Square already in terms of European priorities, but is it just one of the founding members, or does it has a specific role in?
Yeah, well, I would not call Luxembourg a founding member. It was one of the first signatories.
Okay, it's my question. What's the role?
Well,
or initiating it?
I think basically Luxembourg has the same role as all the other member states in this initiative. By signing the declaration, we have all agreed to work together in order to explore how we can make available this communication infrastructure over Europe. Regarding the terrestrial segment, every member state has to deploy the quantum communication infrastructure on their respective territory. In this sense, of course, Luxembourg, we have the same role, and so we are also working on this part to get the terrestrial infrastructure done.
I just still try to understand a bit how they agreed to do that together. I mean, if there's all about, then if they say, okay, this was, then now we have to do that. But it's not just, let's do it all together. So this is, but it's more from the European security point of view in general, and then, okay.
Yeah, well, I think there has to be a starting point somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And the starting point was the declaration. At the beginning, there were only 7 member states. I think some member states were willing to join at the same time, but due to different reasons inside the country, it wasn't possible to join. I think it was also the case for some of the member states who joined really at the very end. They had first to address internal issues before they could really say, okay, now we are ready to sign, and then to get on board. But I think all the member states, they were invited to join the discussions or the meetings we had, and they could see what we were talking about, what it brings. And so I think it was, most of the time it was clear for everyone how we should go forward with this.
Okay. Okay, you just mentioned already that for the EuroQCI, every country has to have its own part in its own country, and then it's joined to a big network. So specifically for the LuxQCI, so because then of course Luxembourg has its own QCI, and you said already the terrestrial part is probably more straightforward. I don't know if it works, but how does it work? There is then the space part as well, and how are the partners involved, and how do you work together? Because a bit more practical. It's not just talking about it. We want to have it, but then somebody has to do it and start doing it. And did you start from scratch, or do you have a consortium? How?
Yes, indeed. So we had to start also somewhere. When we signed the declaration, we launched also a little bit later the what we call the LuxQCI initiative. And of course, we are working together with partners. We, as the ministry, we cannot do it on our own. We don't have the necessary competence. So there is indeed this initiative. So yeah, we have consortium, and we have defined inside this consortium. We have made a plan.
That's good. It's always good to have a plan.
I think so. So we defined together with the consortium members, we defined different or several steps and phases, which will bring us to the goal we want to reach. One of the first steps was to identify potential users of such an infrastructure, which is not an easy part. We had to try to identify requirements. So if there's any entity who should use such an infrastructure, why should it use it? Why should it use it? And how should it be defined or built up in order to address their requirements? So this is quite a difficult. It was a very difficult exercise we made in the first step. And the outcome was not really the one we were expecting, but okay, I think it was at the time a little bit too early still.
Okay.
So, but now what we are doing right now, so we are a little bit further in our plan. We have set up an experimental testbed for quantum key distribution in Luxembourg. And this is a necessary step if you want to define the architecture of the system, how it will work, and then of course once we have set up the terrestrial part, we also have to integrate later on the space part. So
there are already space parts?
No, not really.
Working on demo projects? No.
There are initiatives going on. So just to come back, well, for the terrestrial part, so all the member states around us, just as Luxembourg, we are working on this terrestrial part. So we are trying to build up the infrastructure to make the experimental tests, and then we also have to see how afterwards we can interconnect it, because it's nice to have separate infrastructures in every member state, but if you want to have a network, we need to interconnect all these national QCIs. This, of course, requires also standards to be developed, which are not existing yet, or just a few. So this is also one of the crucial steps that the European Commission and the member states have to achieve. Otherwise, we will have interoperability issues with the system. Then, of course, there's the space part. As you mentioned, ESA. So this is also something that some member states are working on. Luxembourg as well. We are also digging into this topic. And when we talk about space, in fact, you always need the two elements. You need on the other side, so you need the satellite in orbit, but you also need an infrastructure on the ground. And this is also part where we are also looking into now.
Okay. Just a bit more, if we don't want to, but do you mean you have a consortium? So you have then probably research institutions, you have companies, you maybe also have some potential end users with use cases there to test in your test bed, or
well,
not yet?
No, this is well, this is also the tricky points we discussed already before. It's still very early stage, this this technology. So we're trying to address in the first stage governments, institutions. So in Luxembourg, of course, we're trying to talk to other ministries, to other administrations, and so we try to get them on board for some testing. We are also working with the research institute, and so it's not yet there, but we are working on establishing the first links in the near future.
Which brings us to the next question, actually.
Okay.
Which is how mature are the systems? Also, again, you already mentioned a bit, we're not there yet. And we also, if we compare it again to the telecom, for example, it's not that easy. In terms of quantum communication, is probably definitely not yet as seamless. In telecom, we don't care where the signal comes from. It just works.
As a user, yes.
As we're using it, and in the quantum communication, we're probably a bit farther away from that stage. There's still gaps. So is your EuroQCI? Is it still a theory? Is it a demo stage? Is it a prototype? So where are we?
Yeah. Well. It's a nice question. I like it. So, yes, trying to take a little step back. So when we talk about quantum communication, or if you want to build an end-to-end secure quantum communication, we need specific equipment. So it's not just the equipment we know or we use every day. We need, on the one side, on the one hand, we need a generator of keys. And on the other side, we need also a receiver to decrypt the signal or the key. So this is very specific equipment. In between, we have the fiber optics, but it's not just fiber optics as we use. Well, it's the same fiber optics, but we have to use dark fibers, so fibers which are not in use to transmit the key. Because if you take a used fiber optic cable, the signal can be a little bit. So it's like there can be some kind of
exclusive usage of this one cable. So there's not several channels through it. Then it's just this very key because
because
if I just sending single photons,
disturbed, yes, because it's a light signal, yes.
So the express lane for the for the
highway for the
photons. So
exactly. So there are already equipments on the market. So there are devices and products that exist on the market. They are used also currently for the experimental phase, but there's no European solution on the market for the time being. There are many companies in Europe working on developing such devices, but they are not yet market ready. So when I talk about European products, European solution, well, this is in fact coming from sovereignty requirements of the European Commission, meaning that the complete system or the complete infrastructure should be built with EU components only. So this is the way the European Commission chose to go. So one of the challenges lies, of course, in the development of the required equipment to build such an infrastructure. And then afterwards, also we have the question of the availability of the equipment, knowing that if we want to deploy this infrastructure in 27 member states, we will need a huge number of devices. So it's a whole circle that needs to be put in place. But it's not yet the end because after this, it's nice to have the equipment, but then we also have to go into the standardization of all these these interfaces, the protocols. Otherwise, the system will not be interoperable. Products have to be certified. So there's a whole process which is still ahead of us, and we know that this process can take many years. So this is really also not an issue, but it's something we have to work on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you're saying, so in terms of maturity, there are developments ongoing, there are first test beds, so it technically it's feasible, it works, but the interoperability and all this. So if we say, apart from the technical, which are challenges, which are a bit obvious, let's say, but I mean, it's a bit provocative. Sometimes I say that the technical solution is the easy part, but you mentioned it earlier. Once we have this figured out, how it works, the main challenge in practical, you mentioned some like regulatory, finance, standardization, or political. Which do you think are the main, or which is the biggest one you see coming? Or is it all the whole orchestrate all this into one?
It is. I think it's a mix of different elements. I think it cannot be reduced to just one. But we have to address all of them in the same way. So I think
And do we have something in place? What's working? So a project which is in a stage where we can show it, or which is in the making?
Well, in Luxembourg, yes, we have the experimental testbed that is working in the lab.
And for the space?
And no, for the space, it's still too early. The different, well, the satellite is not yet built.
But there is a project.
It's a project.
The one that's going on, or
it's going on,
and that's going to be. It's going to be the space part for
yes,
for the LuxQCI or EuroQCI.
It's for all the member states. So it's this is something which is in a project which is ongoing, it will be used to demonstrate and to validate the system, so the distribution of keys from space to the ground. And this is something we are working on, but as I said before, we're also working on the ground part. So the ground part means also the ground station.
The ground segment from the space part.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, of course, you have to get it to the ground.
Exactly. But apart from Luxembourg, of course, in other member states in Europe, there are many initiatives going on. There are initiatives going on inside member states, but also cross-border initiatives. There are some member states, just to name a few, like Austria or Italy, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain. There are quite a lot of initiatives going on in Europe, and so they show that it works. There are different ways to do it, but it works. But it's there's still a lot of work ahead of us.
So that's then from exactly from the status now. When you say this is where we are now, you say a lot of work ahead. What then what is the vision? What's the long-term goal, and what can you imagine? When are we there, or are we ever there? So how much time will it take? Let's say
it's a difficult question. Yes, if we look at a little bit longer term, as you mentioned, the vision is not only to create this European quantum communication infrastructure, the EuroQCI, which relies on quantum key distribution. The vision is to create the quantum internet in Europe. So quantum internet, I think you mentioned it in the very beginning, linking quantum computers, quantum sensors, and they are interconnected via quantum communication networks. So this is the long-term vision. Well, we don't know really when it will be realized, because this is really a step further. But I think we are working in this direction.
Yeah, you have a goal, or
yes,
say by
EuroQCI,
or why?
EuroQCI, the initial timeline for EuroQCI was 2027. So let's see if we manage to get it done until there. But I think the quantum internet, this is a different timeline.
Okay. Also, when we see currently the quantum computers advancing at the threat where we saw in the beginning, so if they advance, it's great for the calculation and for a lot of other things.
Yeah.
But for protecting our encryption, just your feeling, are we still on time? Or are we already too late for some sensitive data? You say that says we have data with shelf life.
Well, the risk is the hack now, decrypt later.
Yes.
This is really the risk we have as of today. Because of course we every day or every week we hear or we read about some data which has been stolen from some companies, from some institution. And even if all this data is encrypted today, some of this data could be decrypted today, but other data maybe not. So
if some of this data is decrypted in 10 years, when the quantum computer is powerful enough, it's still dangerous.
It's depending on the data. Depending on the data, can still be very, very dangerous. Just think about data from any national security agency, for example. I think they have very, very, very sensitive data, and of course, nobody wants that to be public. So even in 10 years or 20 years, this data is still very, very sensitive.
Okay.
But we can also
also the interest. No, sorry, the interest of the national, of course, security to have it.
That's one part, and of course, we mentioned already before, there are many other use cases. Take the healthcare sector, patient data. This is very important data. We are in Luxembourg. We are talking about the digital patient. So all the data from one patient will be centralized in digital form on a central place. And if you go to consult a doctor, he can access the data and see, okay, this has been done, or this is the problem. And well, this is very sensitive data.
Yeah, of course, you don't want
and to. And as long as the person is living.
Yeah, even that, it's if this is leaking and then suddenly your insurance company knows that you have been diagnosed with something which or your lifestyle or whatever, that's not funny. Yeah, that's true. Okay, having talked abundantly about the European landscape and zooming out a bit and get a global view, maybe for coming a bit to the end, seeing our having 5 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's already time flies when you're having fun. Where does Europe stand in comparison? Let's say there are global. Is this a unique solution or a unique way? Are there other ways? Are there? Let's say, what are the others doing on the global view? Like, I don't know, China, US.
Well, what we have done in Europe, so the European Commission of Europe has chosen to go one way. So we took the path of going into a solution to address the quantum computer threat by using quantum key distribution, but we will combine it also with post-quantum cryptography. So I think the European solution is quite unique in the sense that we we combine with, so we have a hybrid approach using QKD, QKC, using terrestrial segments and a ground and a space segment.
Terrestrial and ground.
And the space segments with satellites in different orbits. So this is, I think, quite a unique solution. In other parts of the world, there are some countries which are more focused on developing quantum computers. Others are also focused on addressing the threat. And addressing the threat, it's done in different ways. I think we have a hybrid approach. Others have just a single approach, for example, PQC or QKD only. But we see different approaches going on in the world.
So we are not the far advanced and unique and the best and the greatest, but we have a unique approach in like combining everything and having this common approach for network. That's what you're saying, or? Yes,
I think this is we're trying to have this global view of integrating both parts. Because we need to cover the globe, because the territories are spread around the world, and by using also this the satellite or the space approach, we are using different orbits, as I mentioned. So you can also, of course, you can put in orbit a huge number of satellites to cover a globe. But you can also have a different approach by using different orbits and using less satellites, for example, to achieve the same thing. So I think this is quite unique. Yes.
Okay. We have one question.
Oh.
So I get to that. So it said, thanks, Rudy. With the rapid advancement of all this technology, how do you foresee this field impacting job creation in the near and distant future in Luxembourg? What specific roles and skills do you think we can be demanding to a new generation of engineers as quantum communication and computing becomes more prevalent?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question. We have not even had time to talk about this part, but this is globally an issue, because we are diving into emerging technologies, talking about quantum physics. And we know that there are many, be it governments or even private companies, that are looking for people who have this educational background. And there is really a lack of resources. So, and this is also something we try to address here in Luxembourg. So together with the university, we are trying to put in place educational courses to also to train students and to get these skills in Luxembourg.
So can you study quantum communication in Luxembourg?
Not quantum communication, but there are, I think in September this year, the first courses will start. I don't remember exactly in which field exactly it is. It might be quantum technologies in general, with maybe a focus on communication. I don't know the exact content of the courses, but we start to think in this direction, because it's very difficult to find people on the market or to attract people to come here, be it researchers, be it engineers or physicists. It's really a big challenge.
Yeah, I see that. That's global, and that's also not only in the quantum world, but I think all kind of technical high tech it's very difficult to get attract the talent here. Okay, I think we have covered a lot. We're already
over time.
Not yet. It's just right on time, but I think we still have time for a summary and a final statement. So I think the wrap-up question would be coming back to the title of our talk, which is the EuroQCI is a science fiction in the making. So it seems to be a very strong European initiative with all members heavily invested. huge efforts are made and it's already happening. So is it still science fiction?
Well, in my personal opinion, I really believe that it's not science fiction. So this is my personal belief. The threat of quantum computers, it's becoming more and more real. So we also see that in Europe, but also outside of Europe, many governments or even private entities are looking into solutions, and they invest huge amounts of money into the development of solutions to address the threat or to develop the quantum computer. So I think there's a clear sign that it's not just science fiction. You have, of course, you have universities, you have private companies investing in research and development activities. We talked about the skills. This is also something which is ongoing around the world. So yeah, I think this is not just something which is some fancy or some nice thing. There is certainly a hype. That's true, but I think the threat is there. The quantum computer is not dead on the market, but we have to think about the solutions already today, because if we wait until the threat is there, then it will be too late to put in place the solutions or the countermeasures. So and we talked about the data. So I think every member state, every entity wants to protect their data, as this is really the core of their business or the core of what they're doing. So
okay, it's happening.
For me, it's happening, and so what we also have to do is, I think we have to raise also the awareness among different kinds of people, be it decision makers, companies, be it also the public in general, inside governments, institutions, because the threat, it is coming. We have to explain where the threat comes from and how we can address the threat with quantum communication or with quantum key distribution, PQC. We have to start thinking about it today. So we have to be ready for the future. So I really think that it will be coming.
Thank you very much. And I think all our Space Cafe today was exactly that, what we were trying to do, to raise the awareness, to say, hey, there is something going on. It's not just some fancy expression that comes in the movies, but it's really happening.
Absolutely.
So I think there's not much to add here, and we're through. So I thank you very, very much, Rudy, for your time today, the coffee, your hospitality, the teams in the background, and it has been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
As
Thanks
always.
a lot, Heike.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And a little teaser for all our audience. Our next Space Cafe Benelux, we will talk a bit more about secure and governmental SATCOM and space for defense in general. So stay tuned. And Elena, back to you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Heike. And before we say goodbye, let me remind you of upcoming events. So tomorrow at 4 p.m. and on the 28th of July, we have our Space Café Israel by Meidad Pariente with Ayelet Galibi. And mark your calendar for when we get back after our summer break. So on the 8th of September at 4 p.m., we have our Space Café Austria by Sabine Pongruber. On the 27th of September, again at 4 p.m. Central European Time, as always, we have our Space Café Black Ops by Dr. Emma Gatti with Dr. Namrata Goswami. And on the 29th of September, we have our Space Café Scotland by Angela Matisse. And as usual, all events are going to be online on Eventbrite, and we would love to hear your feedback, so please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up for our daily and our bi-weekly newsletters. And if you'd like to treat yourselves to something special, become a Space Watcher today or help us in the supporter program. Thank you, Rudy, for the insightful talk and for being our guest. And thanks again to the entire team behind the scenes for doing this great job week by week again. Thank to you, to our audience, for joining us. I hope to see you next week in upcoming events. In the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media. Take care, enjoy vacation, and don't forget, become a space watcher. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
Bye.
you.